way, you might think David Cameron's done us an enormous favour this last 5 weeks in going on the front foot in a whole bunch of issues that remind everybody why we matter so much. So the potential abolition of the Human Rights Act, what we refer to sometimes as Snooper's Charter, anti-extremism orders, which are entirely illiberal, and then the sell-off of housing association properties, and 12 billion, the repeat of Margaret Thatcher's appalling assault on social housing in the 1980s, and then of course the cut of 12 billion from the potential cuts in the welfare budget, all things that would not happen if we were involved, and frankly all things that the Labour Party, if you heard some of the rhetoric at the Labour Party leadership debate today, with the exception of Jeremy Corbyn, none of them actually wanting to call out the Tories for the welfare cuts. All of them wanting to do what Blair did and move on to more right-wing territory to try and win some votes. So you have never mattered more than you do today, but neither have we been in more threat. And, you know, if I'm honest with you, we talked about Grimond and others earlier on. I am not prepared to let the party of Grimond, Penhaligon and co die on my watch. And we have got 61,000 or so members, and we'll need 61,000 or so leaders, never mind one, if we're going to fight our way back. And my sense is that what we will need to do is earn our right to be heard again. Knocking on doors during the election the last few years, clearly there's a sense that people had kind of put their fingers in their ears when it came to the Liberal Democrats. And the reality is twofold. One is, I'm afraid, tuition fees, and the other was just simply by being in government and being outthought and outmanoeuvred by wicked, terrible Tories. And I think, you know, there absolutely is a way back for us. I think people's fingers are out of their ears now. If you've been knocking on doors since the election, you probably have found this yourself. I went out in Tower Hamlets in the mayoral by-election they have there at the moment, the weekend before last. And the answer I kept getting on the doorstep very often was a kind of a sequence that went like this. First was, I voted for you in the past. After tuition fees, I decided not to vote for you. You did not deserve the pasting you got. And because you're delivering all these leaflets and doing a good job around here, I will vote for you in this by-election. Now, that is an interesting kind of sequence, because our job is to just make sure we get to point 4. And you've got to go out there and earn that right. I absolutely believe that there is a passion in this country for what we believe in. I think that people say, we've often said, if we didn't exist, you'd have to invent us. Now we get to prove whether that's really true over the next few years. But our revival has happened in the past. We've talked about the near-death experiences we've had before now, and how we recovered from them. Under Grimond, under Steele, under Ashdown. They don't need to take forever, by the way. You know, those of you who are too young to remember the Thorpe affair, you can Google it and make sure you've got a stiff drink. But so amongst the many wonderful things that Nick Clegg did was to not get arrested for attempted murder. So you think this is a difficult one to come back from. Go back to 1976. David Steele became leader in 1976, and within a parliament and a half. He had taken us to the highest share of the vote we've had in living memory. So the comeback, I would say, is absolutely essential. The Survivalist Party is absolutely essential. It is not, I'm afraid, inevitable, but neither is it inevitable that it has to take forever. And we will absolutely do everything we can to inspire a new group of people to come with us. And in the end, as we reflect on the loss of an outstanding leader in Charles Kennedy, who passed away last week, I reflect on 3 things about Charles. One is his immense humanity, his ability to connect with people without trying, just by being himself. And in fact, Charles gave me an amount of advice in the past, most of which is utterly unrepeatable. But one that is repeatable was before I went on Any Questions for the first time a few years ago, I said, any advice? He said, be yourself. Be yourself. And the guy was himself, and that is why people took to him, because they saw he was being, to use the awful phrase we use these days, authentic. He absolutely was. He didn't contrive it. Anybody who tried to put Charles Kennedy on message would be very disappointed, because his message, he was always on message, but it was his message, and he came from here. Same thing is hugely principled. And many of you will be involved in the party at the time of the Iraq War, and those of you who weren't will of course remember it. Looking back now, one would think, well, it was an easy thing to do, the obvious oppositionalist, populist thing to do to oppose the Iraq War, and it jolly well wasn't. And you remember you had Labour and the Tories ganging up on the Liberal Democrats and indeed some in the Liberal Democrats wanted us not to take the anti-war position, I should add, and Charles Kennedy being bayed at for being a traitor and an appeaser by Labour and the Tories on all sides. I remember the front page of The Sun the weekend after the Iraq War vote, which had Charles's head superimposed on a rattlesnake, this treacherous, slippery traitor who wasn't backing the patriotic rush to war. It was a bold thing he did. It was a brave thing he did, a principled thing he did. And the third thing, so human, principled, effective. This is the man who led us to the largest number of MPs we've had since Lloyd George's day. And I'm going to suggest that those three things, human, principled, effective, they're linked. They're linked. And that's what we've got to recapture. And what we've just seen is an election where the bad guys won. And the bad guys won because they were more effective. And the great danger in politics, as in life more generally, is the bad guys do win because they're more effective. Charles is proof that does not need to be so. The good guys can be ruthless and effective too. And it's about remembering who we're trying to win for. And as we try and rebuild, I am absolutely committed to building a fearsome election-winning machine that we are proud to be part of. I was asked the weekend what my three priorities were, and I thought about talking about the policies that I am most passionate about. And actually, only slightly flippantly, dead seriously, I replied that my three priorities are winning, winning, and winning. Because you can change no one's life from second or third place. And we need to build that election-winning machine, and every machine needs fuel. And to my mind, that fuel is a kind of passion that what you're doing is going to make a difference to people. If you can take people back from the end point of what they achieve if they win to the beginning, then they'll see that it's worth putting all the effort in. And I just finished with this. So the story I tell these anecdotes is an absolutely true one that I used on my team in the final week of the election, just to remind them why they need to keep going in Westmoreland. I remind them that only a few weeks earlier, I told them a story, a few weeks earlier, me and three of my kids have been walking the dog in the woods near our house, and we bumped into a couple and their daughter, and the lady of the family told my 13-year-old girl, out of earshot from me, she said, you should be really proud of your daddy. He got us a house. We were in a one-room bedsit, cramped, and he got us really proud of your dad. And we got home, and Grace said to me, she told me the story, I had a little cry, and then I said to her, think about it, sweetheart. There's 55 houses on our estate, and in the Lake District that does constitute an estate. 55 houses is pretty much a city. But you deliver our estate every month, and as a result of that, we win the council award. And we won the council, and we built 1,000 council houses. That's how we housed that family. You should be proud of yourself, sweetheart. And if you can bring people back from the point where they've achieved something wonderful, they understand there's a point in winning. I admired Blair and Mandelson because they were people who were committed to winning, not because of what they did with it. And people often think there's something dirty about wanting to win. There's nothing dirty about wanting to win. It's absolutely wonderful when you do win, because then you can change the lives of people like that. And I joined the party as a 16-year-old, and the person who was my little hero at the time was a lady called Neva Orrell, who was a 4 foot, 10-inch ginger-rinsed septuagenarian, and she joined the party in 1949. When it was even less of a good prospect than it is now. And she joined it because she'd lived through a war, she'd lost loved ones, and she wanted to join a party that had the values that meant that we would be least likely to repeat the errors of the previous 30 years, particularly the previous 10 or so. And she joined the Liberals, and she spent the next 53 years of her life, before she passed away after a planning committee meeting, aged 89. She probably would have preferred to have gone beforehand, she hated planning. But she spent the next 53 years of her life knocking on doors, delivering leaflets, fighting for council houses, making sure that she worked to get school places for the underprivileged, to make sure she improved the environment of her town. Because if you care about those big Liberal issues, you will prove you care about people by demonstrating it in your community. So community politics is not little politics, it is big politics, and it's the way back, and I'm dead proud of you. Thank you.